Marvel Rivals has such a wide range of characters in each one of their three hero roles when it comes to how powerful each hero is. Like, we have characters in the Duelist class like Wolverine who can survive through a literal nuclear bomb and fight the Hulk who can destroy worlds. Or we have characters like Scarlet Witch who can literally alter history and time. But in that same hero class, we also have characters like the Punisher who can only shoot guns and doesn't have any superpowers. And each role in Marvel Rivals has this wide range of heroes in terms of their power when it comes to these heroes' lore. Even outside the DPS class, we have powerhouses like the Thing and the Hulk for the tank class, or Scarlet Witch and Hela for the DPS class, and Adam Warlock and Loki for the healer class. And each class in Marvel Rivals has their unique powerhouses, but they also have their weak links. So I wanted to figure out today what Marvel Rivals role out of the three in the game, out of the tanks, duelists, and supports, has the strongest heroes overall when it comes to how strong they are in their Marvel lore. Obviously, we all know already who are the strongest in each class, characters like Hulk for the tanks, Scarlet Witch for the DPSs, and Adam Warlock for the healers. But today, we're not only asking who are at the top of each class, we also want to look at the lower end of each of these classes out of the three in Marvel Rivals to see which is the strongest class overall when it comes to these heroes' lore, and how we will be finding out what is the strongest class in Marvel Rivals to get the final ranking from the weakest to the strongest class is pretty much by averaging out every character in the game for each class to get a baseline to see how strong a hero class is. So even though we have heroes who can warp reality in the DPS class, like the Scarlet Witch, we still have to account for the heroes who don't have any powers like the Punisher or Hawkeye, who will lower the overall value for a class. So that means no one single character can simply carry a hero class like how the Hulk can just carry the tank class in terms of pure power. And we will be doing this for every class by looking at every single hero in that hero class to see what is the baseline strength for every class and to see what is the strongest hero class in the game. And obviously there are some roles in Marvel Rivals who have fewer heroes in their roles compared to others, like the Strategist role, which only contains 8 characters in their class, which is the hero role with the least in the game compared to the DPS class, which has the most in the game with 21 heroes in that hero role. So that means every healer in that class has a higher impact in the overall average for their class, while a DPS hero who is an outlier in their class will most likely be averaged out because there are so many DPS in the game. So characters like Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye, who are in the complete opposite spectrum when it comes to the lower power, not have that much of an impact on their class like how an Adam Warlock will have for their healer class, since Adam Warlock is 1 out of the 8 characters in his healer class, while Scarlet Witch is only 1 out of 10 in her DPS class. So with all the context out of the way, let's try to figure out which hero class in Marvel Rivals is the strongest overall when it comes to lore strength. First off, let's take a look at the Vanguards, otherwise known as the tank class, as the start of this ranking. So the Vanguards class has 9 characters in this role, only 1 more than the healer class, which means every character in this role matters a lot to its overall value. So let's first look at the weakest members of the tank class and we will work our way up, with characters like Captain America and Penny Parker being at the lower end. Even though these characters are the weakest in the class, they are still pretty strong compared to other classes' weakest link, with these characters actually having superpowers or super advanced tech. Captain America still has a super soldier serum, his vibranium shield, and is still one of the best fighters in the Marvel universe. While if we look at Penny Parker, he's from the future and has super advanced tech that can be controlled with her mind. But if we look at the middle of the pack for the Vanguard class, we have characters like Venom, Groot, and the Thing, who are all super strong characters, which is pretty obvious since this is the tank class. Venom is still tough enough to take out characters like Spiderman, but still has a lot of weaknesses to things like fire and sound. While Groot and the Thing are pretty much just pure powerhouses with a ceiling to how strong they can get, so they can't really get as strong as characters like the Hulk, who doesn't really have a ceiling to his power strength since his strength usually tied to how angry he gets. Which then leaves the top end of the tank class, which is actually 4 tanks who are at the top end of this class. So almost half of the Vanguards is at the top half, which is great for the overall average, with these 4 heroes being Doctor Strange, Thor, Magneto, and of course the Hulk. Each one of these 4 characters are top 10 strongest characters in the Marvel Rivals roster when it comes to lore strength. Just watch my ranking video to find out how individually strong each of these characters are. But to give you a brief breakdown on how powerful this top end of the tank class is, we have characters like Magneto, who's an Omega level mutant, meaning he is one of the strongest mutant characters in the Marvel universe, rivaling characters like Storm and the Wolverine. Then we have characters like Doctor Strange, who can mess with time, knows almost every spell, which makes him so versatile in combat, and has artifacts like the Eye of Agamotto, which makes him even more powerful. And after all, he is the Sorcerer Supreme in the Marvel universe, maybe only second to Scarlet Witch when it comes to magic. We also have Thor in the top end, who is a top 5 strongest hero in the Marvel universe. Thor is a literal god and has one of the strongest weapons with Mjolnir, and could sometimes be argued to be the strongest hero in the Avengers and in Marvel. The only one who can really compare to Thor's power is this last character in the tank class, that being the Hulk, who is the literal powerhouse of the Marvel universe, who can destroy worlds. Sometimes his powers come from a literal god named the One Below All, and he can get infinitely stronger by how mad he is. So for the first class we're looking at in this ranking for Marvel Rivals, it's going to be hard to beat when we have characters like Thor and Hulk at the top end of this class. So for right now, it sets at number 1 because it's the first one we're looking at, but let's see what class can beat it. Let's look at the Strategist class, otherwise known as the healers. Since this class has the least amount of characters out of every role, so that means each hero in this class has to pull their weight to try to beat the Vanguard class. And looking at the lower end characters of the healer class, it's actually better than the tank's lower end with characters like Mantis and Loon. And even though these characters might seem weak from first glance, they are actually surprisingly both really strong. These characters both have some insane powers, with Luna Snow being able to freeze things at a molecular level and Mantis being able to manipulate people's minds and being really good at combat. But if we look at the middle of the pack of the healer class, it's not that much of an upgrade with these characters like Rockets, Invisible Woman, and Cloak and Dagger, which these characters are better than most of the lower end characters of the healer class, but they still lack something that takes them to that high of a level. They lack either experience, or they lack extraordinary powers, or maybe they don't use their powers to their full extent in most Marvel stories. Then we have the top end of the healer class, which is actually surprisingly strong with characters like Loki, Adam Warlock, and Jeff the Landshark, which obviously Jeff is a gag character, so his strength is kind of played for more jokes since his comics are made for comedy. So take his level of strength with that knowledge. But Loki and Adam Warlock are actually insanely powerful, with Loki being a literal god, but isn't really that good of a fighter compared to a character like Thor, since he is a god of mischief and is not really that good when it comes to combat. Then we have a character like Adam Warlock, who is literally the perfect being and has insane powers, with literally having an Infinity Stone and not being able to die since he can resurrect from the dead. So overall, the hero class is probably the most consistent compared to the Vanguard class on how strong the lower end and the middle section is when it comes to the lower strength, but they really lack high end characters, with Loki not being at the level of Thor or Hulk or Scarlet Witch. And the gap between Loki and Invisible Woman is a pretty big gap for the middle of the pack in the healer class. So even though they have a higher lower end from the tank class, the tank class still has a better middle and a higher end in their class. So for right now, the healers are in second place, only behind the tank class. And finally, we have the Duelist class, otherwise known as the DPS class, which has the highest amount of heroes in their class. So that means the heroes in this class will be averaged out heavily. So that means 3 to 4 characters can't carry a class like how they can for the tank and the healer class. First off, we have to look at the DPS lower end characters, which undoubtedly have the weakest characters when it comes to lore strength, with characters like the Punisher, Black Widow, and Hawkeye, which means they have the weakest lower end characters, with them being in last place for the lower end characters, with tank being second and healers being first when it comes to the low end characters. Now when it comes to the DPS middle of the pack heroes, it's very different from the rest of the roles, since there's so many heroes to fit into this position, with the middle of the pack having a wide range of power levels, with Winter Soldier being at the lower end of the middle of the pack. Then we have characters like the Human Torch, Mr. Fantastic, Magic, and Spiderman, who are pretty good characters to have in your middle class, and is definitely better than other heroes middle class, which finally leaves their high-end heroes for the DPS class, which they have 5 high-end characters, which is the most high-end characters out of all 3 roles, with Hela, Squirrel Girl, Storm, Wolverine, and Scarlet Witch, which all of these 5 characters are some of the strongest characters in Marvel Rivals lore, with Scarlet Witch only being second to the Hulk. So when it comes to which role has the best high-end characters, the DPS class definitely outclasses the healer class, and in my opinion is stronger than the tank class when it comes to high-end characters. But you could definitely argue which class has the better top end, with all the high characters in the DPS class having extraordinary powers, like Wolverine being able to survive through pretty much everything, having adamantium skeleton, seeing regeneration, and is still pretty strong. Scarlet Witch being able to warp reality, create people out of nothingness, wiping people out of existence. And then we have Storm, who can literally manipulate weather and has god level powers through her mutant powers. And then we have Hela, who's the literal goddess of death and can sometimes even beat Thor. And then we finally have Squirrel Girl, who is also a gag character like Jeff the Landshark is, so take that into consideration talking about her power. But now that we have the knowledge of how strong each class is, let's get to the final overall ranking of each class from weakest to strongest. So at last place, which was a pretty hard to decide since all 3 roles in Marvel Rivals are actually designed pretty fairly among lore strength, we have at last place the Strategist healer role, which it was tough for me to decide which was weaker, the healers or the DPS role. But even though the healer role had a better lower end than the DPS class still had a better middle and high end characters. The gap between Invisible Woman and Loki is such a big gap in power, while the DPS class had characters in the middle section with characters like Human Torch, Magic, and Mr. Fantastic and Spiderman, and much more to carry the lower end of their characters. And I also had really high end heroes with characters like Scarlet Witch and Wolverine. So that means in our number 2 spot for our second strongest role in Marvel Rivals, we have the DPS class. And their middle section and high end section carried a lot of this class, allowing for their lower end to be averaged out with their great middle end having some of the highest top tier characters. So finally, that means the strongest role in Marvel Rivals based on lore accurate strength overall is the tank class, which is not a surprise that the role that is designed to be the strongest and the biggest heroes in Marvel Rivals would be the strongest overall role when it comes to lore strength. When almost half of your hero is high end characters in the Marvel universe, you know you're probably one of the strongest classes in the game. And by also having really strong characters like the Thing and Groot in the middle to average out some of your lower end characters, who are no doubt also super strong characters in the Marvel universe, it definitely makes the tank class so much stronger than every other role in Marvel Rivals. But let me know what you guys think of this ranking. Were you surprised that the Vanguard class was the highest end characters? I actually thought going into it was actually going to be the healer class. Then I realized the disparity between Loki and their middle end characters. Let me know what you guys personally think is the strongest role in Marvel Rivals when it comes to lore strength. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any videos I upload, and so you can also support this channel. Hope to see you guys next time. Later, hater. Peace.
If that's not the way